As we started last week on this experience sharing. And then I've been selected to lead some discussion today on road maintenance strategy. So we are going to spend some time this morning discussing road maintenance strategy. My approach will be to give you a little historical background from the pre-independence time and the processes we've gone through, the challenges we faced, and some of the solutions we proposed. My hope is that this will lay the foundation for us to discuss and see areas in which we can make improvements for better roads in Ghana. So that will be the strategy, predominantly historic. And then all of us will discuss and come out with how to move forward in the most effective and efficient manner. As I said, we will start from the colonial days, the early days of road maintenance in the Gold Coast and then Ghana. Now, in the early days, our road network was not too extensive. We had some reasonable set of roads all over the country, but the length was not as extensive as you see now. For that reason, it was possible for every district to have what we call a road register. This was a book covered with some hard binding in which road sections were shown. In fact, they were shown, every sheet had about 2 miles, and all the features at the stage of construction were shown. Now, this document also had room so that if you did any rehabilitation or improvements, you could go in and enter changes which have been made on the network. Even the contractor who did the work was sometimes shown. So it formed a very wonderful base for working on maintenance. And then every district had this. When I went to Takrady in 1970 and I saw this document, I was amazed. And it was so well done that it provided the basic foundation for roadworks and for maintenance. Apart from that, they didn't have some of the modern systems that we are developing. But they were very orderly in the way they did things. And there were several levels of supervisors to make sure that things were done in an orderly manner. You started with the smallest officer, who was the section officer. The section officer stayed in a road camp. And now we have left most of our road camps to deteriorate. We could use these places for other facilities. I don't think we should let the spaces go waste. However, that's what we are discussing now. There were these road camps all over the country. Roughly every 25 miles of road had a road camp. And the section officer stayed at the camp. But the workers stayed in the nearest towns and villages. And they reported every morning for the section officer to show them and lead them to where work was supposed to be done. And this was done. Over the road section officers, we had road overseers. And each road overseer will supervise about 3 or 4 sections to ensure that the section officers were doing their work. Then over the road overseers, we had the foremen who also had their supervision. And then we had the superintendent. And finally, in some of the big districts, we had the district engineer. But the PWD in those days was not only looking after roads. PWD was looking after several other things. For example, buildings, estates, hydrology, and other things. The PWD, so the district engineer was not only responsible for roads, but looked after other issues. But these other officers who were totally dedicated to roads reported to him so that he could see what was going on. The form of maintenance and the quality of maintenance was reasonably good. And the Gold Coast and early Ghana was considered as one of the most effective countries in the West Africa region for keeping their roads in reasonably good condition. The other thing which was done by these officers, that they had rules that at every level, you had a frequency of inspection and what you should do to find out your condition of roads so that corrective action should be taken. The only difference was that it was not considered in those days that maintenance is a plannable thing. You could not plan. It was assumed that maintenance is a way of correcting defects that you detected. That was the big difference. But all these things helped in making sure we maintained the roads. How about resource allocation? Funds were allocated based on three key principles. First of all, what was the length of road network that district maintained? So from the length of roads, a basic allocation would be made. It would be adjusted based on some past experience. There are some areas which may have more serious problems than others. So for that reason, their allocation might be increased or adjusted to suit the situation. The third and final and most interesting reason that was used was that those who worked very hard or those who fought very aggressively also managed to get a lot more than police who were dormant and wouldn't do much. So these three factors served in allocating funds. As a result, those who were very hardworking and committed achieved quite a lot. And this thing happened in the Gold Coast time and the early stages of our independence up to the late 50s, close to the 60s. So
we have been very silent on drainage and the what we call the right of way maintenance and things like that. So it appears that we are talking about only the roadway. What about
I did. The maintenance they did covered the total roadway,
systems,
not just the road surface. The section officers
maintained
the road surface
all right,
and the roadside. For example, the method of weeding was said that by a given time, your roadside should have been weeded. Cleaning of ditches and cleaning of culverts were very critical. Otherwise, you cannot keep good conditions. So the type of maintenance being done in the early days was not restricted to the road surface, but restricted to the total features, because the features recorded in the register covered all these, drainage and so on. The register covered all features of the roadway, and attempts were made to maintain all these features which existed in the roadway. To the early 70s. Now, immediately after independence, there was extensive construction of the road network. We had become independent. As I said, the road network was there, serving key areas, mainly to ensure that things could be moved for export and things like that. So now, after independence, there was extensive construction of roads. So the network increased considerably. The only unfortunate thing with the process was that as the network increased, we did not seem to be given maintenance that kind of attention that it really required. For example, in the early stages, the Israeli company Soleil Bonnet was made to absorb the Public Works Department to form the GNCC. Now, the GNCC, Ghana National Construction, started with a corporation because its name was construction, put a lot of emphasis on construction. And maintenance, even though was not abandoned, did not receive as much attention as one would have preferred as the network increased in length. So that was the first problem that we started experiencing. It was good we were constructing more, but you should not neglect maintenance even as you add to the network. You must rather improve the method of maintaining the network as it increases. The result was that gradually the condition of quite a number of our roads started deteriorating. And there were concerns. And people felt that something should be done. In the mid-60s, Crown agents and other people were invited to study the situation and make recommendations. Part of the recommendations is what led to the ultimate creation of the Ghana Highway Authority, which we will discuss at a later date. But the other part of this kind of concern was the creation of the maintenance management system, which came in the 70s, that I will discuss next. But for now, I want us to discuss the strategy of keeping up maintenance, even as your network increases. And especially in these modern times, when we have tools for harmonizing our total maintenance program to ensure that we have an optimal program which is balancing maintenance, improvements, rehabilitation, and construction and reconstruction. We have to reflect on this because in the 60s, that was our downfall when we did not keep maintenance to the same level as construction was being speeded up. In the early 70s, so under those conditions, Ghana felt that we could not look on as our roads deteriorated. So in the early 70s, a task force was formed to study and make recommendations for improving the situation. This task force was formed with the support of the Canadian International Development Agency, that is CIDA, and later on, World Bank supporting it to do the study. Our immediate, our senior who passed recently and was recently buried, Herbert Queno, was the leading member of the Ghanaian team. Then the consultants, Roy Jurgensen and Associates, were led by Brian, and together, especially in 73 and 74, they did a detailed study of the maintenance system, comparing this with maintenance systems in other parts of the world, and came out with what we now know as the Road Maintenance Management System, shortened MMS for short. Now, it is interesting that as this work was getting to completion, the Ghana Highway Authority was formed. But while they were doing this work, Mr. Di Francois and Harry Papo were also leading a team in studying and preparing for the creation of the Ghana Highway Authority. And the work they did finally ended up in an act in December 1974, creating the Highway Authority. So by the creation of the Highway Authority, at least the base had been laid for operating a more systematic maintenance management system. So that is how we started the thing in 1975. So we moved to 1975, and this is interesting to add a few things which changed. Previously, the PWD was located at where these series of courts have been set up. And then we were moved to some buildings which looked like temporary buildings across the Ministry of Works and Housing. So that's what we were. And then while we were there, the construction of our present location was going on. So by 75, it had been completed. And we moved from that place across Ministry of Works and Housing to the new building where you now are. And that is where we started this implementation of the maintenance management system. At this stage, the consultants were facing up. So the stage of implementation was predominantly left in the hands of Ghanaian engineers who worked so hard to make sure that the system was firmly established. But quickly, let's look at the key components of the maintenance management system. The 4 key pillars were planning, that it is possible to plan maintenance. You do not leave maintenance to chance. You can plan ahead. Organizing, you must organize to get a good maintenance done. So organizing was one of the key pillars. Then directing, you must direct the people involved as to what they must do and how they must report. And of course, you must control what is done. So planning, organizing, directing, and controlling were the key pillars on which the maintenance management system stood. And you realize that these pillars remain relevant virtually in all stages of our life. Let's look at the few key components of the system. Having agreed that we must plan ahead before the beginning of each year, there was an annual maintenance program, an overall program which showed what was going to be done in the coming year. This program was based on defined work activities. Work activities were defined so that you knew what you were supposed to do, and they were given appropriate numbers and so on. While in the 60s, we stopped recording in the road register. Under this system, we started the inventory, the road inventory, so that every district would do the road inventory and store the facilities of the road as existed at that time. These were not put in hard covers like was done in the olden days. So they were on papers which were filed in the district. There can be disadvantages to this, but in recent times, as we will soon become aware, I think you have found ways of rectifying this so that we can have basic information on the network available to us for maintenance. The next issue looked at was quantity standards. What are we aiming at achieving? With given resources, what were we to achieve? So much labor, so much equipment, so much materials, what output? And these were put into what we call quantity standards. So these quantity standards were used for doing the annual maintenance program. And of course, these were based on performance standards. You will not know how much to achieve unless you knew the output of your teams. So we also had performance standards. And these formed the 4 key areas for getting our annual maintenance program done. This was done at national level, broken into the regional, and broken into the district, so that each district had their annual program as to what must be executed during the year. The next stage is that our sections continued to be kept, but the lengths were adjusted a little. So we still had road sections within each district. Each section prepared what we call a bi-weekly maintenance activity schedule. Bi-weekly maintenance activity schedule. In this schedule, the resources required to execute work were shown daily. In the 2 weeks, every day, you showed how much labor you should use, what and type of equipment you should use, what materials you should use, and this was done for 2 weeks on the schedule, so that every day you knew what work was to be done and where it will be done. With this, now we did away with the section officer because the level of supervisors were too many. So now the lowest officer was the road overseer. With this, the road overseer ensured that work was done. When they work daily, that road overseer must report on what has actually been done, how much labor was actually used, what equipment was actually used, what materials was actually used, and the work output achieved daily. And at the end of the 2 weeks, he will summarize it and submit it. And he submitted this in what we call a bi-weekly activity report. Bi-weekly activity report. And these reports were also submitted. The role of the district was then to put these reports together, and at the end of every month, prepare the performance analysis. The performance analysis examined the work output, resources used, and so on, and compared these with what had been shown in the plan. How are we deviating? Are we spot on? Are we doing better? Are we working below the expected level? So that's what the performance analysis showed. The performance analysis also had comments as to what really happened. Is there any reason for performing below? Is there any reason for performing above? Is there any lesson that has been learned during the period? The beauty of the performance analysis is it provided the source for improving the system. From if the performance analysis was properly done, it provided the basis for improving the system, for taking corrective action, and for totally managing, so that the maintenance management system was supposed to be a dynamic system, being improved and growing all the time. Each district sent their performance analysis to the region. That put them together in a regional performance analysis. And these were sent to the head office. And we had 2 young men putting these together in the national performance analysis. Ultimately, one of these young men became the personnel manager. But that's when he started as an officer for putting the performance analysis together. The other grew up in the system but didn't get as high as the one who ultimately became the personnel manager. So from this, we would study and then ensure that things were going on effectively. Let me just discuss on the level of and that type of supervisors we were using under the maintenance management system. In those days, we had a separate bridge division. So bridge maintenance was under the bridge division. Now, basic things like cleaning inlets and outlets of both bridges and culverts were done by the road maintenance people. But further work on bridge inspection and other things were strengthened by the bridge division that had been created. And ultimately, we created the bridge maintenance unit, which we can discuss later when we come to the creation of the mobile maintenance unit, which was looking at higher level of rehabilitation. But if you were looking at routine maintenance related to bridges, like cleaning inlets and so on, that was being done. What we could not do at the district level were checking bolts and nuts and so on to be sure that those have been properly done, because the level of supervisor didn't have the expertise. So that kind of thing was done by the bridge division, coordinating from the head office. So predominantly that was done. What we were saying, I was talking about the level of officers we had for supervision. The road overseer remained as the one in charge of the section. About 3 road overseers were supervised by a foreman to make sure that their work was done. And about 2 or 3 foremen were supervised by a superintendent to see what they were done. Where there were large, one of the superintendents or an engineer was created as the district head. And the district head received all these reports, checked up, and all of them had their schedule of inspection to make sure that these were properly done. The new thing that was created under supervision, under the maintenance management system, was the maintenance engineer at the regional level. Previously, you didn't have the maintenance engineer, and you went straight to the top, the regional engineer or something like that. In this system, there was a maintenance engineer supposed to follow up and check that all the maintenance was being done properly and effectively. And they reported to the boss. At the head office, what we did was to divide the country into 2 sectors. We had the northern sector and the southern sector, each headed by a principal engineer. And these principal engineers drew up inspection programs for all the districts, so that by the end of each quarter, we make sure that the chief engineer road maintenance with his 2 principal engineers have covered every district in the country. Now, that form of inspection was very thorough. It was done for 2 purposes. 1, to effectively train the people who were doing the work. 2, check the quality of bi-weekly maintenance schedules which were being prepared, check the quality of reporting, check the performance analysis, and out of that, you will pick a few random areas for inspection. So immediately after the office work, you will go up with a team of people, the superintendent and a few people. The road overseers and foremen had to wait on their sections as you conducted the inspection. So you conducted the inspections to make sure that things were in tune and things were being done properly. And it is vital to stress this. As we go into more modern methods of planning and programming maintenance, we should not forget that the physical inspection is vital to ensure that things are being properly done and that you are not receiving reports which are different from reality. And it is very important to note. The other thing that happened after setting up the maintenance management system was the extensive training of all our staff. Luckily, at that time, we had the Shy Hill Training Center, and nobody claimed it was their property. We knew that it was the property of PWD, then the property of Ghana Highway Authority. So it was a very important training center where all these officers were trained. And then for engineers and so on, there were additional field meetings and annual conferences to make sure that these principles were properly pressed down. So intensive training. Then that was when we also started introducing the training of people who have come out of secondary schools as technical officers, so that you don't have just the old traditional road officer, foreman, superintendent, but technical officers with a slightly higher level of academic understanding, so that you build them into a core to ensure that the work was effectively done. Now, this is the general background of the maintenance management system. And before the creation of the road fund, we were still depending on central government education for works.
Yes.
So the amounts of monies received were not always equal to what we would have required. But whatever we received was shared proportionately in tune with the annual schedules we had prepared. You cannot prepare the annual schedule, annual program for fun. So the annual program formed the basis of allocating whatever we received from government. And of course, when we did the budget, in tune with this, the Ghana Highway Authority developed a new accounting system for budgeting. And each division did a budget based on these principles. So your budget will show your routine maintenance, periodic maintenance, construction, and other things.
Yes.
And the routine maintenance, periodic maintenance were based on the annual programs which have been developed out of the maintenance management system. So sharing of funds or resources was done in tune with that, so that there will be fairness.
So you get 100% of your budget at the time.
It's difficult to say clearly what an exact percent, because on central government, year by year, you cannot predict them to say that you will get such a percentage. But, but whatever you got, the further distribution should be linked to something objective and something realistic.
Yes.
So we had to link these to our annual programs, which had been done in accordance to the principles already discussed. Annual program would bring out on broad basis the quantity of work or the mileage to be covered under each of the periodic maintenance activities. Note that the performance analysis suggests frequencies. For example, for resealing, there might be a frequency of once every 6 years and so on. So using those frequencies and your length of bituminous surface roads, you could project what could be done. Same with regraveling and other things. With this broad background, the districts and the regions, especially the regions, from their own inspection, will prioritize on length of route which could fit into the system which they felt needed attention. This would then be approved for execution, so that every region's maintenance budget will actually spell out specific roads which were to be done, and the total to be done should fit into the annual program. So that was the basis. So the selection of specific roads to be done were done more by the regions themselves and approved by head office. But they had to be identified and recorded in their budget, so that at implementation, you could monitor and see what was going on. The road condition survey is a system which came up later. When we started the maintenance management system, we did not have the road condition survey. The road condition survey is an improvement which came up later. And the advantage of the road condition survey was that you could link it to modern tools.
Morning, I'm in Manchester.
You could link it to modern tools for projecting work to be done. Those who became familiar with ADM4 and so on, if you did your road condition survey properly, you could do an optimal program which balances maintenance, improvement, and so on with new construction, and make sure that you had an optimal design system. So the road condition survey is something which came up, and recently you are even improving on it. And now you have the modern technology to help you keep and record this properly, so that you are not just dependent on hard bakelite covers, but modern digital data storage. So that is how we have improved from the road register to inventory to the road condition survey. But your thing is that we do this and we put it aside. There is no point in spending effort to do the road condition survey to find out what is necessary and vital to be done and setting it aside. And only last week at your workshop on the new modifications, we stressed that doing the condition survey is not expensive. Even that now sometimes you are not able to do it regularly. Sometimes you postpone it. And after you have done it, doing effective maintenance is also not expensive. But the cost of avoiding maintenance, as we will see towards the end of this presentation, is astronomical. So yes, we must do the condition survey. We must use it to determine what must properly be done, and we must follow up, do it, and achieve results for the good of our country. We had two types of technical officers. There were the technical officers who were linked to specialized fields, like materials and so on. And in Takrad, I remember working with Youngson and so on. All these people were dedicated and they were in the materials division. There were technical officers who were in survey and specialized in survey. The additional technical officers we trained was to support road maintenance. So they were not only to do quality assurance, but also to ensure that they understood the system properly and what we were doing was effective. The whole idea was to gradually, as you say, as more people were going to secondary school and technical school, to gradually phase out the traditional road overseer foremen and superintendents who had the basic education at middle school and replace them with these technical officers who had a little higher knowledge. So there were two groups, but we were working together as a team. For example, when I was in Takrady as the district engineer, we worked with the people in the materials people, the survey, and the quantity survey. We went as a team. Quantity surveyor headed by Donto and Devan, and then one Mr. Interesting Kujo for surveying Jackson and others in materials. So we worked together as a team, even though they were in specialized areas. They supported the maintenance people in getting the work done. And then more quantities, so more technical officers were added in the road maintenance sector only.